The Forgotten Realm, Where Souls Gather Before Judgment. Edgar Cayce's insight. Between the moment your heart stops and the moment you face what comes next, there is a room. Not a metaphor, not a symbol pulled from poetry or religious imagination, an actual dimension, a realm of consciousness, a gathering place, where souls wait, sometimes for what feels like moments, sometimes for what feels like centuries, waiting for something that Edgar Cayce described but could barely comprehend even after accessing it thousands of times through his trance state. He called it the assembly. And across more than 14,000 documented readings, spanning health diagnoses, past life explorations, prophetic visions, he returned to this mysterious realm again and again, each time with growing urgency, each time with deeper reverence, each time struggling to find language for what he witnessed there. Because what exists in that forgotten realm challenges every religious teaching about immediate judgment, about heaven and hell, about the clean narrative of death leading directly to destination. Traditional faith tells you that when you die, you face God immediately. You're sorted, judged, sent to your eternal reward or punishment within moments of your final breath. But Cayce saw something else entirely, something that religious institutions have deliberately obscured for centuries because it complicates their control, because it removes the fear they've wielded like a weapon, because it reveals that divine justice operates on principles far more complex and far more merciful than we've been taught. Between death and judgment, there is a pause, a gathering, a collective waiting where souls stand together, saint and sinner, victim and perpetrator, the enlightened and the lost, all present in the same space, all preparing for something that will change them forever. And what happens in that waiting room at the end of the world will determine not your punishment, but your readiness to finally see yourself as you truly are. In the next 40 minutes, you're going to discover what Edgar Cayce revealed about this forgotten realm, why it exists, who gathers there, what happens in the silence before the mirror is revealed, and most importantly, why understanding this dimension transforms everything about how you live right now, today, while you still have time to prepare, because the assembly isn't just waiting in your future, it's watching you now. In 1937, Edgar Cayce delivered a series of readings so controversial that his own organization, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, debated whether to preserve them at all. These weren't readings about health remedies or past lives in Atlantis. These were readings about the structure of the afterlife, about what happens in the space between death and judgment, about a realm that appeared in none of the major religious texts, but existed with such vivid detail in Cayce's trance visions that he couldn't stop describing it. The readings were fragmentary at first, scattered across different sessions over several years, a mention here, a detail there, like pieces of a puzzle delivered slowly, as if the information itself was being carefully metered out because of how disruptive it would be to established spiritual understanding. But when those fragments were assembled, when researchers at the ARE archives began connecting the threads, they formed a coherent map, a map of a dimension that exists before any soul reaches its final destination, a dimension of preparation, of collective witnessing, of truth so complete that no ego can survive it intact. Cayce called it the assembly, and he was adamant. This was not symbolic, not metaphorical, not a psychological projection of the dying mind processing its transition. This was a real place, as real as any dimension of consciousness can be, where souls actually gather after leaving their bodies, but before moving forward to whatever comes next. Now, here's why this teaching matters more than Cayce's famous health diagnoses or his descriptions of ancient civilizations. because it reveals a stage of the soul's journey that has been systematically erased from spiritual teaching. Christianity removed it and replaced it with immediate judgment. You die, you face God, you go to heaven or hell. No pause, no waiting, no preparation. Islam teaches the same: immediate accountability, the bridge to cross, the destination determined swiftly. Even Eastern traditions that speak of bardos and intermediate states still frame them as individual journeys, solitary wanderings between incarnations. But Cayce described something different. He described collective gathering, shared witnessing, mutual accountability that happens not in isolation, but in the presence of every other soul who has died. And understanding this stage removes the terror from death, while restoring true accountability for how we live. Because when you know you'll stand in the assembly, when you know you'll wait in that vast amphitheater of consciousness, alongside every soul you've ever affected, you cannot live carelessly. You cannot harm without knowing you'll face that harm reflected back to you in the presence of witnesses. You cannot love without knowing that love will be seen, felt, amplified by the collective awareness of all souls present. The assembly is the teaching religious institutions didn't want you to have, because it makes you responsible not through fear of external punishment, but through the inevitable encounter with truth that no soul can escape. And that truth begins not with judgment, but with waiting. Traditional religion has taught you a lie, not intentionally malicious perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. The lie is this: that judgment is immediate, that the moment your heart stops beating, you face God. You're evaluated, you're sorted, sent to your destination without pause, without preparation, without time to understand what just happened to you. But Edgar Cayce's readings revealed something that shatters this timeline completely. He described a vast intermediate realm where souls first arrive after death, a dimension that exists before any judgment occurs, before any sorting, before any soul moves toward heaven, hell, or any other final destination. In this realm, there is no immediate accountability, no angels with scales, no divine voice declaring your worthiness or unworthiness. There is only gathering. Every soul that leaves the physical plane enters this space first. The saint who devoted her life to service, the murderer who died unrepentant, the child who lived only days, the elder who accumulated 90 years of wisdom and regret. All of them arrive in the same place, standing together, waiting together. And here's what makes this teaching so revolutionary. In the assembly, there is no separation yet based on merit, no immediate division between the saved and the damned. Everyone begins in the same waiting room. Cayce was asked repeatedly during his trance sessions, why? Why must souls wait? Why can't they move directly to their earned destination? And across multiple readings, a consistent answer emerged. Because judgment without preparation would be incomplete, ineffective, even cruel. Souls need time to adjust to the shock of death, to release their identification with the body and personality they just inhabited, to begin feeling the weight of their existence without the defense mechanisms of physical life, without ego's ability to justify, rationalize, deny. The assembly exists as a collective pause, a universal waiting room where something profound must occur before any soul is ready to face the full truth of what they've been. But what happens in that waiting? What transpires in the silence before the mirror is revealed? That's the mystery Cayce spent decades trying to articulate. The mystery that changes everything once you understand it. Because the purpose of the assembly isn't punishment. It isn't torture by anticipation. The purpose is transparency. Slowly, inevitably, in the profound stillness of that realm, every soul becomes unable to hide from themselves, from each other, from the collective consciousness that permeates the space. You arrive in the assembly still clinging to your story, your justifications, your version of who you were and why you did what you did. But the longer you wait, the more that story dissolves, until all that remains is the raw truth of your existence, visible not just to you, but to every other soul present. And when that transparency is complete, when every soul can see and be seen with perfect clarity, something happens that religions have tried to describe but always get wrong. The judgment begins, but not from God, not from angels, from something far more powerful and far more terrifying. Let's map the structure of this forgotten realm. Edgar Cayce described the assembly with unusual specificity, not vague mystical poetry, but architectural detail that suggests he witnessed this dimension repeatedly and attempted to translate its structure into language that humans could comprehend. Picture a vast amphitheater of consciousness, not built of stone or matter. Nothing in the assembly is physical in the way Earth is physical, but souls experience it as more solid, more real than anything they encountered during bodily existence. The structure spirals, concentric circles that rise upward and curve inward, creating layers upon layers of ascending awareness, all oriented toward a central point. Souls appear not as bodies but as luminous points of awareness, each one distinct, each one recognizable not by appearance but by essence, the vibrational signature that is uniquely, unmistakably them. And here's what Cayce emphasized. The arrangement is not random. Souls are not scattered chaotically throughout the assembly. They're positioned according to their vibrational frequency, their karmic density, their readiness for truth. Souls who lived with greater consciousness, who faced their shadows, who learned to love without attachment. These souls naturally drift toward the inner circles, closer to the center, higher in the spiral. Souls who lived in denial, who caused harm without remorse, who died clinging to material attachments. These souls find themselves in the outer rings, further from the center, lower in the architecture, not as punishment, not assigned by external judgment, but as natural resonance, like frequencies finding their matching tones. Now, here's where the structure becomes even more profound. Every soul, regardless of their position in the spiral, faces the same direction, toward the center, toward an emptiness that Cayce struggled to describe. Not void, not darkness, but a space of such intense potential that souls cannot look directly at it yet. This central emptiness is where the witnessing will occur, where the mirror will be revealed, where every soul will simultaneously experience the full truth of their existence, but not yet. First, there must be waiting, preparation, the slow dissolution of ego's defenses, and time in the assembly doesn't operate the way time operates on Earth. Some souls perceive their waiting as lasting only moments. They die, they arrive, they blink, and the witnessing begins. Other souls experience years, decades, even what feels like centuries of waiting in that vast amphitheater, feeling the presence of countless other souls, sensing the approach of something inevitable but not yet arrived. Cayce explained that the difference in perceived time depends on the soul's readiness. Those who lived consciously, who faced truth while alive, move through the waiting quickly. They're already prepared for what comes next. But those who spent lifetimes in denial, in self-deception, in refusal to acknowledge the harm they caused, for them the waiting stretches, not as punishment, but as the natural consequence of needing more time to dissolve the layers of illusion they built around themselves. The assembly's architecture serves a purpose: the spiral arrangement, the central emptiness, the positioning by frequency. It creates a container for collective awakening, a structure that holds souls together while they prepare for the most confronting moment any consciousness can experience, seeing themselves as they truly are, witnessed by everyone they've ever affected. But before we can understand that moment of witnessing, we need to understand who stands in the assembly alongside you. Here's what disturbed even Edgar Cayce as he described this realm. In the assembly, all souls gather together, not separated by merit, not divided into the worthy and unworthy, not sorted into comfortable categories that let the good avoid the bad. Everyone. The saint who devoted her life to healing others stands in the same amphitheater as the man who murdered her. The child who died at 3 years old waits alongside the elder who lived 90 years accumulating wisdom and wounds. The enlightened master who achieved liberation occupies the same realm as the person who died in a state of profound ignorance. Every soul that departs the physical plane enters this waiting first. And here's the teaching that most people find hardest to accept. There is no immediate sorting, no angels separating the sheep from the goats, no divine hand placing the righteous on one side and the condemned on the other. At first, in the assembly, you're all just there, together, waiting. But, and this is crucial, souls retain full awareness of who they were, what they did, the choices they made, the people they harmed or helped. Memory doesn't dissolve upon death, identity doesn't vanish, consciousness doesn't reset to neutral. You arrive in the assembly as exactly who you were when you died, carrying every pattern, every wound, every achievement, every regret. And here's what makes the assembly so different from Earth. On Earth, you can avoid people, hide from consequences, surround yourself with those who validate your version of reality, die before facing those you've wronged. In the assembly, there is no avoidance. You perceive the presence of every other soul in the space, not necessarily as individual identities. The assembly holds too many souls for that kind of granular awareness, but as collective witness, you feel them, all of them, the ones you loved and the ones you harmed, the strangers whose lives you touched without knowing, the ancestors who shaped the patterns you inherited, the descendants who will inherit the consequences of your choices. Everyone is present, everyone is aware, and in one case documented in the ARE archives, a woman asked Cayce about her husband who had died after years of abusing her. She wanted to know, will I have to see him again? Will I have to face him in the afterlife? Cayce's answer was both comforting and challenging. You will not have to face him in the sense of being trapped with him. But yes, you will be in the assembly together, and in that space, he will feel for the first time the full weight of what he did to you, not because you tell him, not because God punishes him, but because in the transparency of that realm, he cannot hide from the truth of his actions, and you will witness his recognition. You will see him finally understand. That is the justice the assembly provides. This is why the assembly exists, not to torture souls with proximity to those who harmed them, but to create a condition where hiding is impossible, where the murderer stands in the same space as his victim and cannot pretend the victim didn't exist, where the betrayer waits alongside the betrayed and cannot escape into forgetfulness. Accountability in the assembly doesn't come from external judgment. It emerges from forced proximity, from the simple, devastating reality that you cannot avoid the presence of every soul you affected. And in the silence of that waiting, something begins to happen that changes everything. What happens during the waiting is not punishment, it is preparation. Edgar Cayce described a profound silence that permeates the assembly, a stillness so complete that it becomes almost unbearable. On Earth, you're surrounded by constant stimulation, noise, distraction, the endless chatter of mind trying to avoid stillness, because stillness reveals what you don't want to see. But in the assembly, there is nothing to distract you, no body to feel or maintain, no environment to manipulate or control. No other souls speaking, because communication in that realm happens not through words, but through direct perception of essence. Just silence. And in that silence, you cannot escape your own awareness. Every choice you made, every person you affected, every moment of kindness and every moment of cruelty, every time you acted from love and every time you acted from fear, it all begins to surface, not as memory in the way you experience memory on earth, distant, selective, capable of being revised or suppressed, but as lived experience, present tense, immediate, undeniable. Cayce explained that the assembly functions as a mirror that has not yet been fully revealed. The silence is the preparation for seeing into that mirror, and every moment in the waiting makes the soul more transparent, more unable to hide from what it has been, what it has done, what it has refused to acknowledge. On earth, ego protects you. It justifies your actions. It rewrites your history to make you the hero or the victim. It builds elaborate defenses to shield you from the full weight of your existence. But in the assembly, ego begins to dissolve, not forcefully stripped away, not attacked or dismantled by external forces, but slowly, inevitably thinned, like morning mist burning away in sunlight, because there's nothing to defend against in the silence. No one attacking you. No one demanding explanation, just the steady, patient presence of truth waiting to be acknowledged. In one reading preserved in the archives, Cayce was asked what souls experienced during this silent preparation. He struggled to articulate it, finally describing it as a gradual awakening to the full scope of one's being. Not just the small self that walked through one lifetime, but the eternal self that has walked through many, and the choices that have shaped the soul's evolution across all those journeys. The silence prepares you to see not just one lifetime, but the pattern of your soul across lifetimes, the lessons you came to learn, the contracts you made with other souls, the growth you achieved, and the growth you avoided. And here's what makes this preparation so profound. It's not just your truth you're preparing to see, it's the truth of every other soul in the assembly. Because what comes next, the moment when the mirror is finally revealed, is not individual judgment happening separately for each soul. It's collective witnessing, simultaneous, shared, where every soul experiences not only their own life review, but perceives the essence of every other soul's review happening at the same time. And that moment, that stunning, overwhelming, transformative moment, changes the nature of judgment completely. Here is what religions have hidden from you for centuries. Judgment in the assembly is not delivered by an external God. It is witnessed by every other soul present. Edgar Cayce described a moment, sudden, inevitable, initiated by forces he could not name, when the veil lifts and every soul simultaneously experiences a life review, but with a crucial difference from traditional descriptions of life review. You don't just watch your life unfold from a detached perspective. You don't simply observe your choices and their consequences. You feel them. Every emotion you caused in another person, you feel as if it were your own. Every joy you brought, every pain you inflicted, every moment of connection or betrayal, you experience it from the receiving end. The businessman who exploited his workers for decades suddenly feels their exhaustion, their desperation, their quiet rage at being used. The mother who abandoned her child feels the child's terror, confusion, and lifelong wound of unworthiness. The teacher who inspired a student feels the student's gratitude, awakening and blossoming into purpose. This is not metaphor, not poetic exaggeration. Cayce insisted this was literal experience. The life review forces you into empathic union with everyone you affected, showing you the truth of your impact without the buffer of ego or rationalization. But here's what makes the assembly's witnessing even more profound. You don't just experience your own life review in isolation. You perceive the essence of every other soul's review happening concurrently. Not in overwhelming detail. The human mind, even in soul form, couldn't process millions of full life reviews simultaneously, but as knowing, as direct perception of the collective truth being revealed. You understand in that moment that the abused child sitting near you in the assembly became an abuser themselves, perpetuating the cycle. You feel the weight of trauma pass through generations like a baton of suffering. You recognize that the person who seemed so confident, so successful, so untouchable in life was actually drowning in shame they never spoke about, and their cruelty came from a desperate need to feel powerful. Every soul witnesses every other soul finally seeing themselves clearly, and in that witnessing, something unexpected happens. Judgment ceases to be condemnation. It becomes recognition, because when you see the full truth of another soul's struggle, when you feel the wounds they carried, the fears they couldn't face, the love they didn't know how to express, you can't hate them anymore. You can still hold them accountable, still see the harm they caused, still name it as wrong, but you understand the context, the complexity, the tragic reality that hurt people, and most cruelty is just pain trying desperately not to be felt. In one case documented by Cayce, a woman asked about her son who had died in prison after murdering someone. She was tormented by guilt, wondering if she'd failed him, if God would condemn him eternally. Cayce spoke from trance. In the assembly, your son will experience the life of the man he killed, will feel that man's fear in the final moments, his family's grief, the years of life stolen. Your son will bear that weight fully, but every other soul in the assembly will also witness his own life, the abuse he suffered as a child, the abandonment that shaped him, the desperation that led to violence. They will see the full truth, not to excuse his actions, but to understand them. And that understanding is what allows divine justice to be both ruthlessly honest and infinitely merciful. The collective witnessing is not designed to destroy souls. It's designed to reveal truth so complete that transformation becomes inevitable. Because once you've seen yourself through the eyes of everyone you've affected, once you've felt the full weight of your choices, witnessed by the collective consciousness of all souls present, you cannot remain unchanged. And that brings us to the question no one wants to ask, but everyone needs answered. Why is this necessary? Why must souls gather collectively before individual judgment? What purpose does the assembly serve that solitary judgment could not? Edgar Cayce was asked repeatedly, why can't souls move directly to their next destination? Why the delay? Why the collective gathering? Why must we wait in the assembly when God already knows our hearts, our deeds, our worthiness? His answer, delivered across multiple readings, reveals a profound spiritual principle. Souls must gather collectively before individual judgment because isolation prevents true accountability. On earth, we can hide from the consequences of our actions. We can surround ourselves with people who justify our choices. We can silence the voices of those we've harmed. We can die before making amends, before facing truth, before understanding the full scope of our impact. But the assembly removes that escape. The waiting serves multiple essential purposes. First, it allows souls to metabolize the shock of death. Dying is disorienting, especially for those unprepared. The sudden loss of body, of physical sensation, of time as you understood it, these create confusion that must settle before any soul is ready to face deep truth. The assembly provides space for that settling, time to adjust, time to remember that you are consciousness, not flesh. Second, the waiting gradually releases earthly identity. You arrive in the assembly still clinging to who you thought you were, your name, your accomplishments, your story. I was a good person. I did my best. I deserve heaven. But in the silence, in the presence of countless other souls who also believed they were good, who also did their best, that small identity begins to seem less convincing, less solid. You start to understand that you were not your personality, not your achievements or failures, not your beliefs or your reputation. You were consciousness having an experience. And what matters now is not the story you told about that experience, but the truth of it. Third, the assembly creates the condition for souls to feel the weight of their choices without defense mechanisms. On earth, when confronted with uncomfortable truth, your mind immediately defends, justifies, explains. Yes, but you don't understand. They deserved it. In the assembly, those defenses slowly dissolve, not through force, but through the simple reality that defense is pointless when you're about to experience your life from every perspective anyway. The waiting prepares you to face truth without shattering completely. Fourth, and most crucially, the assembly allows souls to understand that they are not separate. This is the teaching religions lost. The truth that individual salvation is incomplete, even illusory. Every soul's journey affects every other soul's journey. Your choices ripple through the web of existence in ways you can't fully comprehend while embodied. The businessman who underpaid workers affected their children's education, which affected their opportunities, which affected the communities they shaped, which affected on and on, spiraling outward through time and space. The teacher who believed in a struggling student gave that student confidence to pursue medicine, and that student became a doctor who saved lives, and those lives went on to touch other lives, and the ripple continues forever. In the assembly, souls begin to feel this interconnectedness directly, begin to understand that individual judgment is insufficient because there is no such thing as a truly individual action. Everything you did affected the whole, and the whole's evolution depends on every soul facing truth about how they contributed or hindered that evolution. The wait is necessary because immediate judgment would be spiritually incomplete. It would allow souls to avoid the collective accountability that's essential for genuine transformation. And that transformation determines not what punishment you receive, but what happens next in the progression of your eternal soul. When the collective witnessing concludes, when every soul has experienced their own life review and perceived the essence of every other soul's truth being revealed, the assembly begins to dissolve. But here's what Edgar Cayce revealed that challenges everything traditional religion teaches. There is no external force assigning souls to heaven or hell, no divine judge pointing left or right, no angels sorting the worthy from the condemned. Instead, souls sort themselves. After experiencing the full truth of their existence in the presence of all other souls, after witnessing the impact of their choices, after feeling the collective awareness of their place in the web of cause and effect, each soul gravitates toward the vibrational realm that matches its current state of consciousness. It's not choice in the way we think of choice on Earth, not deciding between options, not selecting a destination from a menu. It's resonance, like a tuning fork vibrating at a specific frequency, automatically finding harmony with other frequencies that match. Souls who spent their lives in service, in growth, in love, who faced their shadows and chose healing, find themselves naturally drawn toward planes of light, learning, and reunion with evolved beings. Souls who lived in denial, in harm, in refusal to acknowledge their wounds, who died still clinging to patterns of cruelty or victimhood, sink toward planes of density, confusion, and remedial existence where they'll be given new opportunities to learn what they refused to learn before. Still other souls hover in intermediate states, not ready for higher planes, not dense enough for lower realms, simply in between, continuing their education in dimensions that match their level of understanding. The judgment is not a verdict delivered by God. It's a natural consequence of consciousness recognizing its own level of evolution, and what determines where you go, what frequency you resonate with after the assembly, is not your beliefs, not whether you belonged to the right religion or prayed to the right deity or followed the correct moral code. It's your capacity to face what you have been. Souls who can look at their lives in the presence of all witnesses, see the full truth, the harm and the love, the failures and the growth, and accept it without defense, without collapse, without denial. These souls rise, because facing truth without breaking is the marker of spiritual maturity. And spiritual maturity determines elevation, not worthiness in the moral sense, but readiness for higher dimensional learning. Souls who cannot face what they've been, who cling to justification even after the collective witnessing, who refuse to acknowledge their impact. These souls remain in denser realms, not as punishment but as curriculum. They need more time, more experience, more opportunities to develop the capacity for radical honesty that evolution requires. In one reading, Cayce described a soul who had been a wealthy businessman in life, not cruel but indifferent. He accumulated fortune while ignoring the poverty around him, never actively harming but never helping either. After the assembly's witnessing, this soul couldn't rise, not because God condemned him, but because his consciousness couldn't resonate with higher frequencies yet. He hadn't developed empathy, hadn't learned to feel connection with others' suffering, so he descended to a realm where he would experience poverty himself. Not as punishment, but as teaching, the curriculum designed to develop the empathy his soul needed for evolution. The sorting is merciful because it places each soul exactly where they can learn what they most need to learn next. But it's also ruthlessly honest. You can't fake your way into higher realms, can't pretend, can't manipulate or negotiate. Your consciousness reveals itself through resonance, and resonance doesn't lie. And here's where the teaching becomes both challenging and liberating. You are sorting yourself right now. With every choice you make today, the assembly isn't just future judgment, it's present evaluation. Your soul is already moving toward whatever frequency matches your current level of consciousness. But there's one more shadow side we must address before you can fully integrate this teaching, because not every soul enters the assembly at all. Edgar Cayce documented a troubling phenomenon in his readings. Some souls, upon death, refuse to enter the assembly at all. They cling to the earth plane, haunt the living, remain trapped in denial, unable or unwilling to face the collective witnessing that awaits them. These are not necessarily evil souls. Often they're souls who died suddenly, in accidents, violence, unexpected medical events, and haven't yet accepted their own death. They're confused, disoriented, still trying to interact with physical reality as if they're still alive, or their souls deeply attached to earthly pleasures, to substances, to sexuality, to material possessions, to power. The body is gone, but the addiction remains, and they hover near the living, trying desperately to feel something, anything that reminds them of physical sensation. Or their souls who cannot accept the reality of death, who refuse to believe they've actually died, who insist there's been a mistake, that they'll wake up, that this is just a dream, or their souls terrified of what they'll have to confront in the assembly. They know, on some level every soul knows, that the assembly will reveal truth they've spent lifetimes avoiding, will force them to feel the pain they caused, will expose them before every witness, and so they hide, on the edges of the physical plane, in the shadowy borderlands between worlds, anywhere but the assembly. Cayce warned that avoiding the assembly does not exempt a soul from accountability, it only delays it. And the longer the delay, the more difficult the eventual entry becomes, because souls who linger on Earth don't evolve, don't learn, don't progress. They're stuck in loops, repeating patterns, reliving memories, growing increasingly dense and confused as time passes. Eventually, and Cayce was clear about this, every soul enters the assembly. Whether after weeks or centuries, the pull toward collective truth becomes irresistible. The soul finally surrenders to what it cannot escape. But those who resist cause suffering, not just for themselves, but for the living they haunt. In one case preserved in the archives, a family came to Cayce because their home was plagued by disturbances, objects moving, cold spots, feelings of dread in certain rooms. Cayce entered trance and identified an earthbound spirit, a man who had died in the house decades earlier after a life of violence and cruelty. He was terrified of entering the assembly because he knew what awaited him there, the full weight of every person he'd hurt, witnessed by countless souls. So he clung to the house, to the familiar, to anything that delayed the inevitable. Cayce instructed the family on how to help. Prayer, not for banishment but for release. Speaking to the spirit with compassion. You are loved, you are forgiven. It's time to enter the assembly. What waits there is not destruction, but truth, and truth is the only path to peace. The disturbances ceased within days. The soul finally surrendered to the waiting that would ultimately free him. If you suspect someone you knew is avoiding the assembly, if you feel their presence lingering, if their energy seems stuck, you can help them, not through fear or force, not through aggressive banishment rituals, but through compassionate invitation. Your body is gone. Your work here is complete. The assembly is waiting. Every soul must enter it eventually. Go now and let truth set you free. We release you with love. Say it with conviction, with genuine care for their soul's evolution, and know that you're participating in something sacred, helping a lost soul finally face what they've been running from. But here's the teaching for you, still living. You don't have to wait until death to begin this process. Here is Edgar Cayce's most practical teaching about the assembly. You do not have to wait until death to begin the work. Through specific practices, you can initiate a voluntary life review while still embodied. You can witness your own existence with the clarity that will be demanded in the assembly, but with the gift of time to make amends, to change course, to evolve before it's too late. This is not morbid. This is not self-punishment. This is preparation, conscious development of the capacity for radical honesty that the assembly will require. And souls who practice this work while alive move through the assembly quickly, smoothly, with minimal disturbance, because they've already done the work of facing truth. The collective witnessing holds no terror for them, only recognition of what they've already acknowledged. Here's the protocol Cayce offered for voluntary life review. Begin with deep stillness, meditation, prayer. Whatever practice allows you to quiet the noise of daily consciousness and access deeper awareness. In that stillness, invoke the presence of your higher self, the eternal part of you that sees your entire soul's journey across all lifetimes, that knows your purpose, that loves you without conditions, but also without illusions. Then ask to see your life through the eyes of those you've affected, not just the people you loved or helped, but the people you harmed, ignored, dismissed, exploited. Show me what it felt like to be on the receiving end of my anger. Let me feel what I created in them when I betrayed their trust. Help me understand the impact of my indifference. This is not easy work. Your mind will resist, will want to defend, justify, explain. Don't fight that resistance. Don't shame yourself for it. But don't indulge it either. Hold space for the discomfort. Breathe through it. Let yourself feel what you caused without immediately rushing to make it okay. Because here's the profound truth Cayce taught. Genuine remorse transforms consciousness, not guilt. Guilt keeps you stuck in shame, focused on yourself, paralyzed by unworthiness.